Welcome back, everybody. Today's deep dive is going to be fascinating. I am so excited for this one. We're diving into this idea of the kingdom of God.
Ooh,
It's based on a recent sermon series by Pastor Mark.
okay.
And, one of the things that really caught my attention about these sermons is how he connects spiritual citizenship in God's kingdom to his own personal experience of becoming a Swedish citizen. Like how even after years of living in Sweden,
Right.
he was still essentially a visitor until he made this conscious decision
Yeah.
to fully embrace the language, the culture, the whole thing.
Yeah, it's a powerful analogy, isn't it? I mean, he
Yeah.
talks about how you can live somewhere but not really be a part of it
Yeah.
until you make that commitment.
It's like you're just kind of skimming the surface.
Right.
But to really become a citizen, to really belong, you got to dive all the way in.
Yeah, you got to go all in.
And that got me thinking, am I really ready to dive in and embrace the values of this different kind of kingdom that we're talking about?
Yeah, that's a great question.
So before we even get there, let's just back up a little bit.
Okay.
What exactly is the kingdom of God? When we hear that phrase,
Right.
what pops into your mind?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people would picture a physical place, right? Or maybe a specific group of people.
Like heaven or something.
Exactly. Or just the church, But Pastor Mark really challenges those assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
He points out that in the Bible, that term, kingdom, it refers primarily to God's reign or rule.
Oh, interesting.
It's not so much about a location
Okay.
or even a specific group.
Mm-hmm.
It's about God's active authority
Authority.
over everything.
So less about a place on a map
Right.
and more about whose authority is over the map.
Exactly. And I think that's a key takeaway here if we want to understand this whole concept.
Okay.
God is the ultimate ruler,
Yeah.
and his kingdom, it's universal, it's active, it's not passive or far off in the future.
So, if God is already ruling over everything,
Yeah.
then where do we fit into this picture?
Yeah, that's where things get really interesting. Pastor Mark points to the setting of the Sermon on the Mount.
Mm-hmm.
Both times Jesus delivered this message, it was on a mountainside.
Okay.
He asks us to consider historically who sought refuge on mountains, often revolutionaries, right?
Revolutionary.
Those trying to establish a new order,
Mm-hmm.
a new kingdom.
Oh, wow.
So he's kind of setting the stage here
Okay.
with this imagery of a revolution brewing on the mountainside.
So is he suggesting that Jesus is a revolutionary leader?
Yeah.
Overturning the existing power structures?
In a sense, yes. Jesus is presenting a radically different kingdom,
Mm.
one that operates on completely different values and principles.
Okay.
And that's the key.
Yeah.
That radical difference. That's what grabbed me about these sermons.
I love that image of a revolution on the mountainside.
Yeah, it's powerful.
So, okay, how is this kingdom different from the systems of power we see in the world today?
Well, before we jump into the specific values that make it unique,
Okay.
Pastor Mark highlights 3 ways that this kingdom is already near to us.
That's what I was wondering about earlier.
Yeah,
If God's reign is all-encompassing,
right.
how does it actually touch our everyday lives?
Yeah, good question. The first way Pastor Mark describes it is that the kingdom is within us.
Within us.
He quotes Luke 17:20-11-21,
Okay.
where Jesus says, "The kingdom of God does not come with your careful observation, because the kingdom of God is within you."
So it's not about looking for external signs or waiting for some future event.
Exactly. It's about surrendering to Christ's rule in our hearts,
Mm.
allowing his influence to transform us from the inside out.
So it's a personal thing.
Very much so. It's an internal experience.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What about the second way the kingdom is near?
The second way is that it's around us through the church.
Okay.
He describes the church as the embodiment of God's kingdom, working to bring about his transforming presence in the world.
So it's not just about individual change, but a collective effort
Yeah,
to reflect God's values in our communities.
that's right. The church, when it's functioning as it should, acts as a tangible expression of God's kingdom on earth, working to heal, restore, bring about justice.
I like that. And the third way?
The third way is that the kingdom is coming soon.
Okay.
Whether through Christ's return or our individual passing, there's a culmination coming.
So we're living in the already but not yet
Exactly.
of God's kingdom.
We experience it now, but we also anticipate its full arrival.
So if this kingdom is so near, How do we even begin to recognize it?
That's where the values come in.
Okay.
Pastor Mark talks about the kingdom operating on a completely different set of values.
Different how?
Values that seem paradoxical, almost upside down compared to the world's way of thinking.
So like the Beatitudes.
Yes, the Beatitudes are a perfect example.
Okay, so for those who aren't familiar,
Right.
what are the Beatitudes?
They're the series of blessings that Jesus pronounces in the Sermon on the Mount,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not what we typically expect.
What do you mean?
Well, for example, Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek."
It's like everything we think we know about happiness and success
Right.
is being flipped on its head.
Exactly. It's completely countercultural.
Okay. I am definitely feeling that deep dive sensation now.
Yeah, me too.
This is a lot to unpack, but I'm intrigued.
I think our listeners are going to be too.
I hope so. What do you think, listener? Are any of these paradoxical values resonating with you already? We'll be back in a moment to explore them in more detail. Okay, so these paradoxical values, it's like they're really challenging our assumptions, you know?
Yeah, it's like we're being asked to completely rethink everything we thought we knew
About success, happiness.
about how the world works.
Mhm.
And that's where I think the real power of this revolution on the mountainside lies. You know,
Yeah.
it forces us to confront the ways our thinking has been shaped by the world and to consider a radically different way of being.
Okay, so let's unpack some of these paradoxical values a little bit.
Mhm.
You mentioned lower is higher earlier. What does that actually look like in the context of the kingdom of God?
Well, it's all about humility.
Humility.
Think about it in the world system. It's all about climbing the ladder, you know,
Right.
being the best, being at the top.
Gotta get to the top.
But in God's kingdom, true greatness comes from lowering yourself, serving others, recognizing that you're not the center of the universe.
So instead of like vying for that promotion at all costs, maybe it's about using your skills to mentor someone else,
Yeah,
even if it means they might eventually surpass you.
exactly. It's about putting the needs of others before your own ambition and
Yeah.
finding fulfillment in the empowering others.
Rather than just seeking personal gain.
Right.
Okay, and that kind of ties into the next value you mentioned. Others are first,
Yeah,
which, let's be honest, is pretty countercultural
totally.
in today's world.
Yeah, in a world that's all about me first.
Yeah. Look at me.
This kingdom value challenges us to prioritize the well-being of others.
Even if it means sacrificing our own comfort.
Yes, even if it's inconvenient for us.
It's like embodying that selfless love that Jesus demonstrated.
Absolutely.
Like even in those everyday situations, you know,
Yeah, totally.
where we have a choice to put someone else's needs ahead of our own.
Mm-hmm.
Like letting that frazzled parent with his screaming toddler go ahead of you in the grocery line, even though you're in a hurry.
Right, those little things.
Yeah, exactly. Those small Bailey choices.
It all adds up.
Okay, so then there's weak is strong.
Yeah, that one's a head scratcher.
It's kind of hard to wrap your mind around it.
It is. It seems completely counterintuitive.
How can weakness possibly be a strength?
It boils down to recognizing our dependence on God.
Dependence.
Yeah. When we acknowledge our own limitations, our weaknesses,
Okay.
we open ourselves up to God's power working through us.
So it's not about denying our limitations,
Yeah.
but about acknowledging them and relying on a strength that comes from outside of ourselves.
Exactly. Pastor Mark uses this image of a branch connected to a vine.
Okay.
The branch can't produce fruit on its own.
Right.
It needs that life-giving sap from the vine.
Mm.
In the same way, we find true strength not in our own efforts,
Okay.
but in our connection to God.
It's a beautiful image
Mm.
and so different from the message we often hear in the world, you know,
Yeah.
where it's all about self-sufficiency and pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps.
Yeah. The world tells us to be strong and independent,
Mhm.
but the kingdom says true strength comes from surrender.
From acknowledging our need for God.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we have perhaps the most challenging value of all.
No.
Enemies are loved.
Yeah, that one's
It
tough.
goes against every human instinct
It does.
to want to retaliate
Right.
or seek revenge.
Yeah, when someone wrongs us, our natural inclination is to fight back.
But this kingdom value calls us to a higher standard
It's,
to break the cycle of hatred
yeah.
and violence.
It's about choosing love over revenge.
So how do we even begin to wrap our minds around loving our enemies?
It starts with recognizing that they are still human beings,
Okay.
created in the image of God.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about understanding that love in the truest sense, it's not a feeling.
It's a choice.
Exactly. It's a choice to extend grace and compassion.
even to those who have hurt us.
Yeah, even when it's hard, even when we don't feel like it.
It's a powerful concept, but I can imagine it's incredibly difficult to actually put into practice.
It is. It requires a radical shift in perspective.
And a willingness to tap into a source of love that goes beyond our own human capacity.
That's right. We can't do it on our own.
It makes me think about those times when I've felt bitterness or resentment towards someone you know.
Yeah.
It's like I'm holding on to that negativity, and it's poisoning me more than it's affecting them.
Holding on to unforgiveness hurts us more than anyone else.
Yeah.
Forgiveness is a powerful act of liberation.
For ourselves and for those we forgive.
Yeah.
You know, and speaking of radical shifts in perspective, Pastor Mark also talks about two other intriguing values.
Which ones?
Inside is out and grace is enough.
Yeah, those are good ones.
What can you tell us about those?
Well, inside is out emphasizes the importance of inner transformation.
Okay.
It's the idea that true lasting change starts from within.
From our hearts and minds.
Yeah. It's about aligning our thoughts, our beliefs, our desires with God's values.
And then letting that inner transformation naturally flow outward.
Influencing our actions and how we interact with the world.
It's like that saying, be the change you wish to see in the world.
Exactly. True change starts with us.
With each individual embracing these kingdom values. And grace is enough.
Yes.
That one really stood out to me.
It's a powerful message.
I think it's something a lot of people struggle with. What does Pastor Mark say about it?
He emphasizes that God's grace is a free gift.
Okay.
Not something we can earn or deserve.
We can't earn it.
No, it's not about our performance.
So it's not about trying to prove ourselves to God.
No, it's about resting in the assurance that we are already loved.
And accepted unconditionally.
Exactly. It's a message of freedom and liberation.
It's about letting go of that burden of trying to earn our way to God.
Yes.
And embracing the gift of His grace.
And that raises an interesting question, doesn't it?
What's that?
If God's grace is truly enough, do our actions even matter?
All right, we are back. And I have to say, my brain is still kind of processing all of this.
I know, right? It's a lot to take in.
It really is. It's like a whole different framework for understand your life, you know.
It challenges everything we thought we knew.
It really does. And, you know, we ended the last part with that question. If God's grace is truly enough,
right,
do our actions even matter?
Yeah, that's a big one.
It's like if we're already loved and accepted no matter what we do, then why even bother trying to live a certain way?
Why follow the rules?
Exactly.
It's a question a lot of people wrestle with.
I think so.
Pastor Mark addresses it directly in his sermons.
Okay, good, because I was really hoping he would.
He says that while God's grace is absolutely free, it's not a license to do whatever we want.
Oh, okay, so it's not a free pass.
Not at all.
To just live however we please.
He describes grace as an empowering force that motivates us to live differently.
Okay, that makes more sense.
He uses the analogy of receiving a really extravagant gift, you know, like something really precious. And he asks, when someone gives us a gift like that, don't we naturally want to express our gratitude?
Course.
And to use that gift in a way that honors the giver.
It's like you wouldn't just take this amazing gift
right,
and then just toss it aside or treat it carelessly.
Exactly. You'd want to use it and cherish it and show your appreciation.
Okay, so how does that apply to God's grace then?
Well, our actions become a natural overflow of our gratitude for God's love and mercy.
So it's not about earning God's love.
No.
But about responding to it in a way that reflects His character.
That's it. It's like saying thank you for His incredible gift.
By trying to live a life that's pleasing to Him.
Exactly.
It makes me think about the difference between following rules out of fear or obligation versus living out of a genuine desire to please someone we love.
Yeah. It's totally different motivation.
It's like when you love someone.
Right.
You naturally want to do things that make them happy.
It's not a chore.
And you don't need a list of rules to tell you what to do.
You just want to show them how much you care.
And that brings us back to the concept of the kingdom of God being within us.
Yes, full circle.
When we truly surrender to Christ's lordship, His values become our values.
And His desires become our desires.
So our actions, they just naturally start to reflect that inner transformation.
It's like a ripple effect.
Yeah, the kingdom starts in our hearts.
Right.
And then expands outward.
Influencing how we live.
And how we interact with the world.
And as we embrace these values of the kingdom, we become agents of change, you know?
We start to bring God's love and grace into every area of our lives.
Yeah.
our relationships, our work, our communities
It's about living out that revolution on the mountainside.
in very real and practical ways.
Exactly.
Wow, this whole deep dive has been incredible.
I know, right? It's been a journey.
I feel like I have a much deeper understanding of what it means to be a citizen of God's kingdom now.
Me too.
So listener, what about you? What's resonating with you most from all that we've talked about today?
Is it the idea of God's sovereign rule? Or maybe one of those paradoxical values like lower is higher or enemies are loved?
Maybe you're still wrestling with that question about grace and whether our actions really matter.
Whatever it is, I encourage you to sit with it for a while,
Let it sink in.
and
Yeah.
consider what it might look like to actually live out these principles in your own life.
Yeah, because here's a final thought-provoking idea for you to ponder.
Okay, I'm listening.
If the kingdom of God is truly both within us and around us, then maybe the transformation we long to see in the world. It starts with the transformation of our own hearts.
That's powerful.
It is. That's going to do it for this deep dive into the kingdom of God.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Until next time.